Hi, let's talk about 5-volt 3-pin ARGB cables and 12-volt 4-pin RGB cables. They're not the same, and you don't want to mix them together. And also, since we're talking about that, we're going to go over some extension cables, a splitter, and some male-to-male adapters. Now, it should be known that this is definitely cable dependent, because not all cables you'll be able to do this with. But let's get into the topic. First off, these here are male-to-male adapters, and you would use those to connect extension cables like this. You see here, it's female on one end and female on the other. So what you could do is connect this end to your motherboard, and then this end to your devices or your RGB strip. Now, let's just say you have more than one RGB strip. Perhaps you have 3 or whatever, right? Okay, so what you could do is use a splitter like this. You got your female on one end and female on the other, right? Now, what you could do is connect this end here directly to your motherboard and put your strips on the other end here. Or if it was necessary, what you could do is use an extension cable like this, where you plug this into your motherboard, and then you have these pins. These pins will come out, and that's what those are. But this is definitely cable dependent. Some will come out, and sometimes they don't. You usually can kind of sort of tell a little bit if you look closely. You'll notice that some of them are, the plastic would be like fused together, where this you can kind of sort of see like a little gap a bit, right? Okay, so I've already taken this extending cable and added one of those so that you could see what it would be like. That is basically this one right here. Okay, so what you were just looking at, except with one of those added. Now, this one, this is also a 4-pin 12-volt RGB cable, but this one came from my motherboard, which I believe was my X570 gigabyte motherboard. I believe so. Now, this one, if you look closely here, see if we can zoom in, you got the female end here. And if you look real closely, you'll see that the plastic is kind of fused together. You don't really see the same gap as you did on the other ones. And on the other end, you got the male pins. And you can see it's labeled as well, 12 volt and RGB or GRB. All right, there's something else I wanted to point out as well about the cables. Similar to the 3-pin ARGB connectors, there's like this little arrow here, and that's meant for lining up, you know, this to your motherboard, or to connect it to other, you know, adapters, splitters, and extension cables, right? You see the pin there? You line them up together, okay? Now, here's the thing. We're dealing with 4 pins, not 3, which means they're not keyed. You could very easily make a mistake by not paying attention and plug this into your motherboard upside down. There's nothing stopping you from doing that, right? So this arrow means more than just lining up your cables together. And I'll explain what I mean. On the 3-pin ARGB cables, those also have a little arrow on them. And that little arrow is also found on the motherboard. Although that being said, each motherboard might be different, and you're going to need to look at your motherboard manual to know exactly where you're supposed to plug things in. However, since we're talking about the 4-pin RGB connectors at this moment, sometimes what you'll find is something like this. If I can get it to zoom in, it says 12 volt GRB. On the motherboard, you should see something just like this that says 12 volt GRB, and you would line up these with what you see on the motherboard. So If on the motherboard the 12 volt is on the right side and the B is on the left side, you would put it into your motherboard like this. You see what I'm saying? But if on the motherboard the 12 volt was on the left side and the B was on the right, you would put it in like this. And just to give you an idea of what I meant about lining them up, matching them, you'll see here that I've connected the cable together and the lettering matches to the other side. Connecting it to your motherboard, having the lettering match up, line up. Okay. On the 3-pin ARGB, there's like a little arrow that shows you where you want to plug them. Now, that being said, on these other 4-pin, it's only got the arrow and no 12 volt and lettering to give you an idea where that arrow is supposed to go. This is why you need to look at your motherboard manual. And I'll pull one up real quickly and grab a few photos so you can see that if I hadn't, read my manual, I might not have known which orientation to plug this into the motherboard, be it that side or this side. Okay, but the motherboard manual will tell you what that arrow goes to. And in a moment, I'll grab a photo and slap it into here. But the photo that I'm going to be using is going to be coming for my motherboard. You'll have to look at your own motherboard manual to verify where these are supposed to connect to. Okay? All right, I just wanted to point that out so you don't make a mistake by plugging in your cables backwards, which isn't possible, by the way, with the 3-pin because they're keyed. This is not keyed, though. So you could make a mistake and stick it in upside down if you're not paying attention to where the arrow goes or the lettering. Okay? All right. Okay. So real quickly, we're going to take a look at my motherboard manual to look over the pinouts and the layout of the motherboard, just to get an idea of what they look like, the RGB and ARGB pins, as well as where you would take your cables and place them and how you would do so. So we're going to start off with the motherboard layout. Okay, now let's zoom in a minute. Alright, so this is my motherboard for the MSI X570 Tomahawk Wi-Fi. Your motherboard will look different, but you'll be able to get at least the idea of what we're talking about. Back out for just a moment. We'll back out for just a moment. Now, this would be, your pinouts of where where everything would go on your motherboard, and of course yours will look different, but this gives you, a basic idea of what you would be looking for and looking at. Okay, I'm going to zoom in a moment. Now, on my motherboard, I have two 3-pin 5-volt ARGB headers and two 4-pin 12-volt RGB headers. Now, here, we might just want to zoom in a little bit more, perhaps. There we go. Okay. So, here is JRGB1, so 4-pin. And actually, I want to zoom in even more, because I want you to see something here. I know that they're actually pointing at the devices, but I think with this particular one, if you look closely, there's actually a little black line here. I'm not certain if that's just part of the diagram here, but do take note of that particular black line, and I'll show you why down below. But look at the dots. You've got 1 and then 2, which is covered by the red line pointing at it. So 1, 2, 3, 4. So 4-pin 12-volt RGB header. That's that one right there. Now my other one is up at the top right here. Again, 1, 2, 3, 4. Now this time that little black bar that I was talking about is covered over, but I do believe it might means something, and I'll show you why in another diagram below. Okay, so here at the top of my motherboard I have 1, 2, 3, 4. Oh yes, okay, here you see this black bar. It is significant, so keep this in mind. All right, and it might be different on your motherboard and your motherboard's manual, but it's just something to kind of grasp the idea of and the concept, because it will matter. All right, now, so we've got 1, 2, space, 3. Oh, no, excuse me, I'm going backwards. Backwards, I'm looking at it backwards. 1, 2, space, and then 3. Okay, so this is your 3-pin, 5-volt ARGB header, which is why it's J rainbow, and this one's, RGB. All right. My other header for that is right here, and again, 1, 2, space, pin. Okay. Excuse me. So yeah, again, here's your black bar, and pin 1, pin 2, space, 3. So 3-pin header, ARGB 5 volts. Now, you can't mix them together, and I don't believe that there is a spacer on the pinouts. This is just a diagram because you need to be aware of what your pin 1 would be, I guess is how to put it. Okay, so on your motherboard, it's not like there's a plastic piece blocking you from putting something in incorrectly. Although with the 3-pin, it doesn't matter because it's already keyed with the blank space. Okay. All right. Now that you've taken a look at, let's move back up. Now that you have taken a look at the motherboard layout quickly and what you're looking at for your pins, we're going to look at the pins in orientation to what your cables would connect to and how they would connect. Okay, we're going to zoom in one more time. Now, I had showed you on my diagram above where certain headers were on my motherboard, so same correlation, but now we're going to look at the pinouts for our cables. Now, 4-pin, 12 volt, right? Here it is, 12 volt. Excuse me. And JRBG connector. Now, see this little arrow? See the number 1? So you need to be aware of where number 1 is. And I believe that is why they show the, yes, you see this line here. Just like I was showing you up, earlier in just a moment ago, up above on the motherboard layout, there was a line present. This is the same thing I'm talking about. To know where pin 1 is, be aware of that, so that you look here, say pin 1. So pin 1 essentially goes to your arrow, and then arrow to arrow. Alright, so that's how you connect it. And because this is 4-pin, by the way, and not keyed like the 3-pin is, if you flip this around the other way because you're not paying attention and you don't stick this arrow where it belongs, it will go on. There won't be anything stopping you from doing it, and when you turn on your computer, it's not going to be a good time. Anyways, let's move on to the next. Okay, same idea. So strip or fans or whatever. Pin 1, and your pin 1 to the arrow, and this is your power fan connector. So anyways, moving on to the next, the 3-pin for a minute on J-Rainbow. Same thing, pin 1, looking for pin 1, and you've got your key. So you don't want to connect 4 pins to 3 pins. You don't want to do that. Okay. So pin 1, and then you just got to pay attention to where the diagram tells you to put the arrow. By the way, you've got the key here, so you're following, 2, 2 to 1 anyways. Here on this one, just the arrow and then 2, 2 to 1. Okay, so this is how you connect your cables to your motherboard, by paying attention to the pinouts and the cabling. Now on my computer, in my build, I have both 3-pin ARGB devices and cables and the 4-pin RGB. I have some splitters, and those particular splitters are able to be cut to length. Now I don't believe that that's the case with ARGB strips. I think those you cannot cut. But the RGB strips, some of them you can cut to length so that you can have them fit exactly where you want them in your case. Now, as I was stating, this one came from my motherboard, and those pins do not come out. So you have your female end that connects to the motherboard, and then you would connect this end to either a splitter like that, or perhaps an extension cable, or another female device where the plugs would plug into, because you can't obviously connect the pins to the motherboard when the motherboard has pins on it. That's what this end is for. Okay, so let's put that aside. We just went over the extension cable, and these are basically what you were looking at there, extension cables. On the other end here, this is capped, is basically the same thing over there. I believe I have another one here. And yeah, here it is. This is another one just like it with the cap removed. Okay, and just for reference, there's the cap that I was talking about. Anyways, those are your 4-pin 12-volt RGB extension cables and a splitter. Now we're going to go over and look at some 3-pin ARGB cables that I have. And then after that, we'll probably go on to eBay or Amazon to look at others that I do not have, so you can get a look at like what the pins would look like, okay? So they're going to be slightly different in this particular situation because of how they were made for Lian Li's devices. Okay, just to point that out. That's why we're probably going to have to go and look at some others after the fact. But what I do have here is, you see here, 3-pin, and you'll notice that, if we can get zoom in, you'll notice that there's a pin that's sort of keyed off, right? Yeah, that's one of the reasons why you can't mix 4 and 3 together. But also, once again, this is a 5-volt, and the 4-pin are 12 volts, so you don't want to mix them together. On this cable here, we have the males. Pull that little thing off, okay? All right, so here's your 3-pin, and again, keyed, right? And if you look closely, you'll notice that the plastic is fused together. There's not like a little bit of a gap, so this does not remove. Now this particular cable we're looking at has two males, all right? One on this end and one on the other end. The other end is capped, but for now we'll just take the cap off. All right. So there's your 3 pins male, 3 pins male, and on this cable, this end of the cable, this connector, this is I believe what they call a JST connector. I believe that's what it is. And this connects to, in this particular case, because we're dealing with Lian Li's stuff, right? This connects to their RGB controller. All right. Now, if you were using this with a situation, maybe you were going to put this on your motherboard, you would have to make sure the pins line up, and you would line up your arrow and slip it onto the motherboard. So that would control from the motherboard to the other end with these. These are also JST connectors, but these are the male side. See if we can get it to focus in. Okay, male end. So these can connect to this. as well. Like that. These two can connect together. So these are JST connectors. So this is slightly different because we're dealing with Lian Li's stuff with this particular kit and these cables. Deal with those caps afterwards. All right, now I'm going to end the video, and I'll jump onto the computer with OBS, and we'll go to like Amazon or eBay or something like that, and we can look at a couple of 3-pin 5-volt ARGB splitters and adapters, which will look similar to those. Okay, we'll go take a look at that. We're going to go take a look at those in just a moment. One more look here, and feel free to pause the video if necessary. See if we can get one more look here. Although I think I want to flip those around like that, I believe. All right, so here we go. Yep, one more look, just so you can get another see here. And again, as I said, this is cable dependent. These particular ones go to Lian Li. So we're going to go look at some others now. All right, and I appreciate you're taking the time to watch this, and if you make it to the end, that's great. Thank you very much. Let's go to Amazon or eBay and go take a look at a couple more cables and the video. Thank you. Okay, so what we're going to do here is go into Amazon and do a quick search. 3-pin 5-volt ARGB cable. Alright, similar to what I was showing you with the cables that I had. You've got the 3 pins and the 3 pins, and which are the 3 male pins and the female ports. If you look closely, you'll be able to see that little arrow that I was talking about as well. Okay, now essentially that's the same, that end that you're seeing there is the same as this, you know, it's the end of that cable, right? And these are the pins, except set for 3 and not the 4 like I had on the table in the other room. So this is basically what I was talking about, is that you can get cables that will have these male-to-male adapters that can be used for splitters or extension cables. Sometimes you might run into a situation where you could have a case that has one of those, one of these here. Maybe I shouldn't point to that one for a moment. Hold on, back to the top. Okay, right. So just put those pins inside this for a minute. Think, you know, look at it as if the pins are already attached. You could potentially have a case where, and I don't mean scenario, I mean PC case, where there may be an ARGB cable coming from the case to be plugged into something. And the thing is, if it already has pins attached to it, you cannot take that cable and plug it into your motherboard, because the motherboard also has pins. And if that was the case, you would need a female to female adapter, similar to these male to male adapters, unless you were using an ARGB controller, which maybe it has the connectors already, you know, the pins or the female ports. So for me, I'm using Lian Li's controller and Lian Li fans and a Lian Li ARGB LED strip that's meant for the LANCool 2 mesh case or the RGB case. So I have that, but I also have 4-pin 12-volt RGB strips that I'm using, and I have them connected to something like this, but 4-pin and not 3. and also not 4 adapters. It's just 3 of them, like this one here. So what I'm doing is this end right here is connected to the motherboard, and then I have 3 strips that are connected to this, which are 4-pin, in my case, 12-volt RGB. And you know, this, like I said, this is connected to the motherboard on this end. This is connected to my strips, but I also had the ability to use stuff like this, which is why you saw, you know, on the table in the video, you know, earlier in the video, where I had a splitter and male pins and adapters and extensions. That was so that I could use all of the, well, not all, because there's more than 2. Excuse me. That's so that I could use both the 5-volt 3-pin connectors for the Lee and Lee strip and controller for the fans. But because I also wanted to have lighting in areas that, like on the back side of the case and things like that, I needed to put strips there. And I only, with this particular case, there's only so many places you can put them, so I got strips that could be cut down into size. Let's see if we can find one of those real quick here. So go 4-pin 12-volt. Here they are. But these aren't the exact ones, but this is pretty much what I'm kind of using. Something like this. Matter of fact, this one actually comes with the strips and the connectors, and as you see, there's 4 pins and everything. Okay, so these here, if you see, there's like little golden 4 little like spots there, right here, here, here. Okay, so I'm not using this entire length. So there's places where it only goes to about here inside the case because it's only so much space that I could, you know, attach them to. There's some that are a little bit longer, and so between the 3, they were all cut down to different sizes to fit inside the case exactly where I wanted them. And yeah, so on my case, I'm using both these plus 3-pin 5-volt ARGB, as well as the just basic RGB. Alright, so that's it. Thank you for watching. Please like and subscribe, and again, thank you for watching.